Good morning. You listen to WPVM FM in Asheville, North Carolina, 103.7 on your dial. I'm Blaine Greenfield, and this is the BLAINESWORLD Show, and we're heard each Wednesday here on WPVM, and you can also watch us on WPVM's Facebook page. I'm here right now in my Zoom studio in Fairview, North Carolina, and what we do each week is focus on the Asheville theater scene, as well as on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Dewana Little. And Dewana, you can wave to all your fans and friends in Facebook world if they're watching. So you can wave.
Hey.
And that's Dewana. And Dewana, I need to take a long breath on this, Dewana, because as you were telling me off the air, you do about 27 different things. So I'll start from the top. She's Executive Director of the YMI Cultural Center in Asheville, and that's where you are now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. She's also the full-time Community Relations Officer for the Self-Help Credit Union and co-founder of the youth leadership program Positive Changes. And so I asked you off the air, do they give you, for all those jobs, do you have a pair of roller skates to get from one job to another?
No.
or I guess you budget your time pretty well, or you have to,
Yeah.
get by, because not only that, I should also mention about Dewana, she's a fourth generation Asheville native. This is kind of exciting. One of the few people I know. So you were actually born in Asheville?
Yeah.
Okay. She's a mother of three, guardian of a niece, and she grew up, ironically, participating in many programs and services at the YMI. And the question, Dewana, I asked her, I know you're from Asheville, and when you were a young woman growing up in the Asheville area, did you always know you wanted to be involved in nonprofits?
No.
As a kid, what did you want to do? Do you remember?
I wanted to be a nurse like my mom.
Okay. So what got you away from nursing?
I became a CNA, and it was like, yeah, no. This is not really what I wanted to do. I just wanted to help people in different ways. And so the youth seemed to speak to me more because I connected with the youth a lot. So that's really what got me into nonprofit.
Oh, it's really cool, as I mentioned, so that you actually participated as a youth with the YMA programs.
Yeah.
And so what was that like?
It was fun. We took like etiquette classes. They did like oratoricals and things like that. And so at the time, I was like, why is my dad or my mom making me do this? But it ended up coming full circle because I ended up needing the skills that I learned through some of the programs I went to here as I became an adult and got into my profession.
Do you remember any of the teachers you had growing up as a kid through YMI?
Oh my gosh. It was so many different people. I can't think.
Let me ask you, okay, I'll put you
sorry.
on the spot on something else. You mentioned they taught you a lot of different kinds of skills and etiquette and all that good stuff. Share one thing you remember that you learned as a kid. Do you remember one thing?
How to be like politeness, you know what I mean? Like just generally being polite. It's like it was a little bit tough. I was kind of like not a problem child, but kind of ish. And, and so my attitude was just bad, and like self-control mattered, you know what I mean? And all of the things that they was teaching us, like you control how you move. So I, like learning that lesson early helped me later.
Well, it's funny, full circle now. So you mentioned you have three children now, and you're a guardian of a niece. Are they going through YMI programs? Are they going through programs also?
Yeah, my oldest two actually is a part of the Positive Steps program here. And they were participants in the program. Now they're 16 years old and they're actually coming back to be mentors in the program.
Oh, very cool. You mentioned positive steps, changes, I guess, right? What is
No,
that?
Positive Steps.
Positive steps. What's that?
That's our youth program here at the YMI. We are supporting, it's really a community initiative, and it was a community member who was doing this work with the kids without having a structure or organization and just doing it. And so we wanted to support him in expanding it, his vision, and scaling it. And so we were able to put resources and support around him so he was able to do what he wanted to do.
Who is that person?
And another
Who is that person?
Daniel Young and Miss Cassandra Ingram, which is crazy because she was my counselor in school. And it
Oh,
was like in middle school, it was crazy.
okay. No, that's nice. I like giving a shout out to people. I mean, so that they really do quite a job, helping youths. How many? You mentioned that you have various youth programs. How many children participate in YMI programs approximately?
And well, to date, if I count all the cycles, I
Sure.
want to say about 50 kids done, 52 kids done participated.
Okay.
With between two cycles. And so right now in our cycle, we have 21 kids.
Now, if you explain, if you would please, by cycles, what are you talking about?
It's a 12-week program. And so we do it in cycles. 12 weeks, and then we take a break and they restructure and prepare for another 12 weeks.
And what kinds of things happen during these 12 weeks?
Oh, wow. Career inspiration, tutoring, of course, mentoring. That we're actually in partnership with the YMCA. So the program, because we'll be closing down our building, will actually be hosted at the YMCA, and this cycle actually has been. And so they are learning a lot. They're learning about fitness, health, they entrepreneurship. They actually participated in the Big Craft Eat last year in December, so which was super cool. And they made products and sold them, and so they're learning a lot actually to be so young. Financial management, goal setting. They all develop personal development plans, and vision boards for what they want to be.
What's so cool about that, even as you're saying it, is that I'm thinking out loud that this is the type of stuff that schools don't cover. Either they don't have time to cover, or we have crazy school changes, not necessarily in Putnam County, but in other states. You're reading about all the garbage that you can't do any, you can hardly teach anything. And so what you mentioned, for example, goal setting, I don't recall as a kid ever learning that, or entrepreneurship, or basic financial management. It's fantastic because otherwise they never pick it up,
Yeah.
So how long, if somebody participates in YMI programs, how long are they with you? For a year, 2 years, their whole lifetime?
Until they don't want to be with us anymore. like,
Okay.
like even at the end, we definitely don't be like, oh, okay, your time's up here. You know, we're always, it's people that's been with the YMI 15, 20, 30 years. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, we're committed and it's a long-term relationship. We don't do anything with a short-term vision.
How
So.
how old do you have to be to start participating?
In the youth program or the adult programs?
Both,
Because
if
we
you would,
have,
please. Yeah.
so the youth program, it starts, well, we got elementary school in our youth programs too. It's intergenerational all the way up through high school. We actually in the high school and the middle schools. And then we have our adult programs, and that's anybody. We even work with high school students continuing who want to start getting into the workforce, exploring some workforce options. So it's not limited here. We don't limit it. It's not really a number cap on participation here.
So on the adult program, what are the kinds of things covered in the adult program?
So we have workforce development programs that also has the peer support component and the community health worker components that but through our workforce development, you get your training for free. And so you go through the programs and you're able to go through our partnerships with AB Tech and other training for institutions for training for workforce development. We have our down payment assistance program. We have our community health program and initiatives with the workout, the Get in Shape initiatives. We have our oh my gosh, there's so much stuff. Successful Transitions Program, which is a match savings program and also network building for you to achieve any goals that you would like to achieve as far as home ownership, credit building, entrepreneurship, personal self-care, learning about different resources and things like that in the community. It's a Met Savings program. And so, um, yeah, we got a lot going on.
What's cool about this is, as you're saying it, these are again programs that aren't covered not only in schools, but as you said, when people graduate, then where do they learn this stuff? Where do they pick it up? And I'm really impressed because nobody actually teaches that to people. That you have to. I guess if you didn't have YMI, you'd be trying to floundering around or going anywhere to get help. And that ties into work you also do, and I'm so impressed with it, with the self-help credit union. And explain if you would too. And it's interesting because they seem to just tie in so well together. You work. Would you say that's true? That you work with
Yeah,
YMI?
I think, yeah, definitely.
It's part and parcel with the self-help credit union. I've always loved the term self-help credit union. We'll give a shout out to our mutual friend Jane Hatley, right?
Yes, definitely.
And you used to work with Jane. And so, for the benefit of people not familiar with the self-help credit union, what's that?
So it's an awesome, awesome place to banquet. As we think about traditional institutions, it's a credit union. And so it's a community focus. You know what I mean? Our mission is economic opportunity for all. And so we're able to do things and support community in different ways than traditional institutions are. And so you can actually, like we got our CD program, and so you can actually designate where your money is invested. You can get a Go Local CD. You can get a Child, Youth, and Children CD. You can get different types of green energy CD, and really specify how your money is used. But also, they have the youth savings account, which allows us to be able to have a Met savings program for the youth to motivate them to want to save and build their habit of savings. We also have the 570 credit score for home ownership, which is a big component and a big initiative of mine, plus just several awesome resources. We got the credit builders. We have a lot of resources. And so it's just awesome for people to get involved in it.
Well, let me just take a quick break here in terms of you mentioning self-help credit union, and you mentioned a couple of great resources. Let's take maybe the self-help credit union first. If folks want to get more information about that, they're listening to the show or they're watching it, how would they get information about self-help credit union?
Selfhelp.org.
Okay, is there a
Just
hyphen
go to
in
the
that?
website. We have 3 branches. We have 2 branches in Asheville, one on South French Broad and one on Hendersonville Road. And they just go on the website and see what all we got to offer.
Okay, is there a hyphen there? Self-help credit union? No hyphen.
Yes, self-helpcreditunion.org.
Okay.
Well, it's self-help.org.
Okay, great. And so for folks not familiar with it, I strongly encourage them to check it out. And specifically, the last thing you mentioned was something a lot of people don't know about, and that's talk a little bit, because remember when it got off the ground, about the home ownership program. What's the idea behind that?
And so one cool thing, well, we always had that 570 credit score to be able to qualify for or pre-qualify for a home loan. So initiative that we have started over the last 2 years is getting more people of color into homes, because as we think about economic opportunity for all, we recognize that home ownership, the ownership of land and home, is one of the historically and currently one of the biggest wealth drivers of intergenerational wealth known. You know what I mean? Land is the one thing that doesn't really lose value. You can't create it, you can't duplicate. You know what I mean?
Right,
it's
right.
the one thing that doesn't really lose value. And so we really wanted to push that initiative as we think about the social challenges that we faced over 2020 and where we're at now, and making sure that that those things are possible and that people know that they're possible. And so we get out as much information about all that we offer as possible. And so that's a big part of my work, is definitely getting that.
But talk more about that, so that if somebody's listening or watching, they're interested in hook up with a self-help credit union, they can go to the website. What kind of help do you give them? And if somebody's interested in their first home, and you mentioned that a number, how does that all tie in together?
So one big thing about my position is I created a Black Economic Solvency program for self-help, and I've been able to partner with YMI, my role here, to be able to pair those together to be able to increase more home ownership for Black people, and very intentionally and specifically. And so I work with them from credit building to like from, okay, I want to build a home, all the way to, okay, I found a home, I'm under contract, I'm ready to close, type of thing. You know what I mean? So I would kind of walk with them all the way through the process. And it's super important and it's exciting for me because I just bought my first home last year.
Oh, did you? Very exciting. Yeah. And did Self-Help Credit Union, did you work with them?
Yes, I did.
Okay, very exciting. So first home, so if somebody contacts you, you mentioned, for example, credit building. Talk about that process, though. In those credit is great, but you also have to be very careful with it also. You know, it's not...
Definitely.
So
Definitely.
Talk about the kinds of things you work with people or tell people.
Well, like a lot of people, and even I actually learned it from Jane. She was definitely a mentor for me. And so a lot of people, when they think credit, oh, I need to go pay off everything to get credit. But it's like pay everything down to where it doesn't hurt for you to make the payments. You know what I mean? Like, don't get more than you can really afford to get. It was crazy because my problem wasn't necessarily having bad credit. It was just I was paying for things straight out because I was taught as a kid, you know what I mean? Like, don't get credit cards. You don't want to owe people, you know what I mean? And so I just was buying stuff straight out. Like, all my cars have been purchased straight out. And outside of the apartment that I was staying in, I didn't have anything that was reporting to my credit. And so they're like, you don't got nothing. Like, you're not making payments on anything, and I wasn't. So I had the bill credit. I went and got the credit bill, the loans, and that's why I teach people. I'm learning just as much as they learning in the process. And so I have a partner, Anna Marie Smith. I love her to death. And so she comes in, she do that one-on-one. She helps to pull their credit. They go line for line. She go line for line through them with their credit and help them to look at different ways. Oh, you can probably dispute this if that don't look like something they spend on your credit, and help people to really get a grasp and understanding of why credit matters. Like, credit didn't matter to me until I was about to buy a home. But now my kids are young, like my teenagers, and they are thinking fast forward about credit and things that they can be doing, money management and things like that. But that just wasn't a topic around the dinner table in my time. You know what I mean?
It's funny you said that, Dewana, because I used to teach in my teaching days. I remember a student once came to me, and he told me the most incredible story that he was paying off for 3 tires he had bought, and he bought 3 tires, and he was paying them like 5 years after he had the car, and he was paying like 18%, interest or whatever it was at the time. And he didn't realize, because he didn't have a self-help credit union or somebody like you to help them. He didn't realize he had money in the bank, and his bank was making like 1%, 2% interest. And he thought that was a great idea to, put it and make 1% and pay off 18%. You have to kind of be shown that by somebody. And a lot of people don't know it, It's really a shame. So thank you for doing that, because, like I said, a lot of people, including, it's really cool, your kids, are learning at a much younger age than I guess you did.
Yeah, definitely.
How do you find, are people receptive to the message?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It's funny because we make it fun. Me and Anna kind of double team most of the time, and we make it fun. Like, my experience, it was a lesson that I had to learn, but at the end of the day, it was a lesson, and I learned something, and I grew, and so it was fun. And so we make it fun. We do the spending diets, and what does it look like if you really write down everything you spend money on in 2 weeks? What does that look like over 2 weeks? And people are like, oh my gosh, I spent $30 on chewing gum.
Let me ask you, you raised an interesting kind of recommendation there. Do you recommend people write down everything they spend?
I think, like, it's good to do it initially. You know what I mean? It can be kind of tedious if you try to do it long term, but initially, just to give you a ballpark of what you actually spending your money on over the course of 2 weeks to a month. You know what I mean? And then you like, wow, in 2 weeks I spent this amount of money on that. I really didn't need that. that could have been money I saved because it helps you to see like the opportunities. Like a lot of people, their biggest thing is I can't save, I don't have any money.
Right, right.
But then when you really look at your spending, and then you're like, okay, maybe I could do without that or do without that. And that's why I call them spending diets, because then you start really thinking about realistically what you spend your money on and realize you really have more money than you think you do.
Well, I love your point there because it reminds me too. I won't mention the specific coffee chain, but some people will go get a cup of coffee. And it's no longer, a dollar cup of coffee, $2 cup of coffee. You know, they'll spend $6 or $7 a cup of coffee with Danish or something else with it. And so if you spend every morning $10 or close to it, you're not going to have very much money at the end of a week or a month or a year or something. But I guess your point is that people don't know it unless they see it.
Yeah.
They just don't think a little bit about it.
It's an unconscious thing. Spending, like a lot of our spending is done unconsciously. And not like, oh, we know we got money in the bank, so it's easy to pull out that card and swipe the card and not thinking, okay, then you get home, you be like, dang, I could have knocked off that.
Well, we'll talk about what you just said there. Let me get your advice on that in terms of other people, but using the credit card. Should some people, I guess, not use credit card at all or not even bring it with them?
So I'm that person. I have 3 banks, and I only got a credit card to one of my banks. And one of them, it's just savings. I've 90% of the time be forgetting I even had that one. And then the other one is like, okay, this is my cushion, my emergency funds right here. And so I am like, my check is split 3 ways. You know what I mean? And that way, first of all, you don't miss what you don't have. And if you have a card, make sure it's to the account that you can limit the amount that's going in there, so you start to limit how you spend money. It actually builds that habit of budgeting a little bit.
And I guess that's the advantage also to having folks use a debit card, because you can't spend money, if you don't have it.
And credit cards are great if you make payments. Like one thing you just gotta that's the biggest thing, is being consistent on paying your bills on time. Being consistent on paying that money back on time. And it offers a benefit, might a little bit interest be ridiculous. But if you pay your bill on time, like I have a credit card right now. I got something on it that was like $70 when I bought it. I paid it down to like $20. And so I pay like monthly, like the minimum amount is like 35 cents or something.
Well, the example I mentioned to you with my former student with the tires were, I'm making a figure, it might have been like $200 initially. And then by the time he paid it off, it was like $900, because he wasn't paying the minimum payment, he just was paying whatever he paid, and he didn't give any thought to it, and you have to kind of think it out. And then I guess you have to pay certain things, I guess with the higher interest charges, you should be more cognizant of those than if somebody has like very low interest charge,
All of it matters. Absolutely.
Well, point well taken. Talk a little bit back to now, you're at the YMI Cultural Center, you're at the headquarters there now. Talk about the history, I guess, of YMI. How long has it been around?
129 years old as of February the 12th.
Really very exciting. How did it get started, and what's the background on it?
Well, Mr. Isaac Dixon and Mr. Edward Stevens Lee, principal, actually. They actually went to George Vanderbilt because they wanted a center like the YMCA for the Black community. And this was pre-integrations, before integration. And so they went over there and talked to him, and he actually put the money up to be able to build the YMI. And then the Black community came together. It's actually the first for me sign of collective economics. You know what I mean? Because the community came together, and in 1906 to raise $10,000 to collectively save $10,000 in 1906 to buy this building back from Mr. George Vanderbilt to pay him off, that's big. You know what I mean? And so I just love to think about that. Like, the history is really deep, and we've been here 129 years with good and bad and all the mixtures that could happen in 129 years, but we still here and we still standing.
Now talk about it too, because it's kind of unique. It's the same location, right, that was when it was originally built?
Yeah.
But then also, I believe, right, you're currently having a capital campaign now going. Are you trying to raise more money for it?
Yes, to restore the building. So it's 129 years old. So of course the building standards in 1893 was drastically different than 2022. And so it was built on dirt. And we had things from a tree growing out the back of the building. You still see the branches literally going out the bricks. And flooding because it pushed in. And so we had to find ways to stabilize the building, but it's 129 years old. So you can imagine that it needs upfits and need to be updated and some repairs.
So talk about the capital campaign. So when did that kick off and what's the goal on that?
It kicked off in 2021. And well, the bigger part of it kicked off in 2021. I actually started working on the capital campaign in 2020. Well, 2019, then 2020 happened, kind of stopped everything a little bit. And then we started picking back up in 2021, relaunching in 2021. And so it's to restore the building, but it's also to build organizational capacity. One thing is we never had a reserve for hard times like COVID, which I hope don't come again, but situations like COVID, when you got to shut down and different things like that, you can't rent your spaces, everything's so restricted. But being able to have a reserve, have a scholarship fund, and be able to really be the asset that we are striving to be in community. We was once the epicenter of Black life in Western North Carolina, and we're trying to get back to that place and really be able to have that type of impact.
Talk about the pandemic then in terms of the impact on YMI. So I guess, unfortunately, for a year or a year plus, a lot of your programs were kind of shut down.
Yeah, that first year we did because it was so much social movement. It was so much. It was like a human rights fight that was happening in 2020, especially the movement and being that safe space for Black people to be able to have those tough conversations and be active in the movement. We wanted to make sure that we was available for that. And so 2020 was more of our advocacy year. Our advocacy year for liberation of Black people. And so that just kind of absorbed 2020. But also in the midst of that, we were feeding, we were doing all type of COVID relief type of activities. And so it was super important to be more involved in community than actually in the building, renting it out and stuff.
Now, so I won't say the pandemic's over, but we're hopefully getting past much of it. So is the building now open back to what it used to be?
Oh yeah, 2021 was actually our biggest year in my tenure. And so we actually tripled in size and capacity and programming over the year 2021, and it's just growing. Even though our building will be shutting down at the end of March for the restoration project to start, we're still raising money, but we'll still have our programs going in different locations. Bridge Foundation was gracious enough to offer us space, as well as United Way and the JRC.
Very exciting.
And the Center for Crafts.
Okay. Yeah, it's just to remember all this stuff. I'm impressed. I'm almost overwhelmed by all these different things you're involved in. What do you see as YMI's biggest challenge over the next year or so?
I think this restoration project is the biggest part. You know what I mean? Raising the fund, we got a big goal set ahead of us, and so raising the funds, we're getting there, and we definitely applied, but making sure that we have all the money and resources needed to really reopen the building and let it be everything that it needs to be for community.
Very exciting. Dewana, if folks want to get in touch, let's say, with some of the things we've talked about, so let's take each one. So YMI, a separate entity from the Self-Help Credit Union, how do they find out about YMI?
They can go to our website, YMI Cultural Center.org. You can sign up for tours or to be a volunteer. You can also learn about our programs, and definitely reach out to us, call us, sign up for a tour. That's the greatest way.
You answered my question. So certainly you're also looking for volunteers all the time?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Always.
So to find out more about YMI Cultural Center, you can go to that website. And again, mention the Self-Help Credit Union. If folks want to be interested just in that specifically, best bet is to go to what website?
Self-help.org.
Okay, and I'd like to thank you, Dewana Little, for being my guest in the first half of today's Blaine's World show. I'm really impressed with some of the stuff you're doing, and just keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and as Dewana works her way out of this station or Zoom studio, where I'll kind of be rude to her and kick her out, I'll have our next guest come in, and as he's kind of working his way in, I'd like to remind folks that WPVM's mission is to foster community through programming that cultivates dialogue to inform and entertain. The station provides the medium for artists, businesses, and community leaders and nonprofits to share their voice on live radio, also on Facebook Live. Listeners are invited to help support the efforts by making a tax-deductible contribution. They can do so by going to the website, wpvmfm.org, and looking at the donate option on the upper right-hand side. My next guest is somebody I've known for a bunch of years, and he is Mark Medlin, a certified life and business coach. And Mark, you can wave to all your fans in Facebook world. If they're watching, great, and that's Mark Medlin. And Mark is a certified life and business coach who's particularly interested in coaching and helping individuals for their well-being in retirement. And I guess the first question I'd like to ask guest Mark, first time you and I have met on the show, is you grew up where as a kid?
I grew up in the Raleigh-Durham area.
Okay. And growing up in the Raleigh-Durham area, did you always know you wanted to be a coach and business coach and working with people in retirement?
No, not at all. No, I was kind of a creative kid, and because of some changes in my family, my parents got divorced. My mother wanted to move to Tennessee when I was in high school, and she was Methodist, so she encouraged me to go to college at a United Methodist College in West Tennessee. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was in college,
Join the
but
crowd.
you know, some of us are wanderers and some of us are not.
And what were you?
I was a wanderer, and I wanted to experience lots of different things. My career has been a patchwork of some very interesting jobs. For example, in 1984, the House and Senate in Washington, D.C. were getting their first computer systems. The people who typed the letters for the senators and congressmen on typewriters, those were all out, computers were in. They hired me to train those people and the congressmen and the senators to use computers, the first email, the first word processing, the first spreadsheets. And so I actually personally taught some of the congressmen and senators to use computers, including Albert Gore, although I did not help him invent the internet.
That was before your time.
Right.
But yeah, good guy. I wish Albert Gore had stayed around. Or I won't get into political discussion, but I was impressed by Gore. So
Yeah.
at one time, so you were training people in computers and stuff like that. Where'd you go from there?
I wanted to learn about leadership development, and so I got a job at a large regional bank in the Mid-Atlantic area as a management development specialist. So I trained the bank managers in supervisory skills and leadership. I did that for about 4 years, and then we had a child and wanted to be closer to grandparents. So I got a job in Nashville, Tennessee with a telecommunications company as a senior director of several functions, including user training and that sort of thing. So I bounced around quite a bit. I ended up in healthcare primarily.
And you did healthcare for a bunch of years. Is that correct?
Yes, over 20 years, mainly Lean Six Sigma quality improvement, education, and consulting.
So what led you into then this idea of then working with people as they approach retirement or as they enter retirement?
Well, I'm 65 now, and I would say from the age of 60 on, I was sitting at my desk all day. I was making good money. I was ended up in the IT area. They wanted a Lean Six Sigma person to do training and consulting in quality improvement in IT. And I developed a DVT, a blood clot in my leg. which I didn't know I had and I ignored. And so I just sort of drug my leg around for months and months and months. And then finally, somebody said, you know, that really could be serious and it could cause a stroke. Well, my dad had had a stroke. So I thought, you know what, I better go to a doctor. So I went to the doctor. She said, you have a massive DVT. This is very dangerous. You could die at any moment. You know, we got to put you on blood thinner. She put me on blood thinner, and I had a lot of unexpected side effects. I had pain in both legs, numbness in the lower part of my body. I had a lot of stuff going on. So I went back to her and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And she said, okay, well, I have to do a test that we don't usually do because it's not paid for by insurance. We have to take a certain type of CAT scan of your heart to measure the amount of plaque that's in all of the blood vessels in the heart. And if we find that you don't have any plaque, we can take you off the blood thinner. So it's a very convoluted, detailed story here, but I'm getting to a point. So I paid $200 for this CAT scan. I went in and had that. It took all of like 2 minutes to do, and I didn't have to drink anything or do anything. They just took a picture. She called me immediately and she said it was very good that we had this picture, Mark. And I said, why? And she said, well, you had 0 plaque anywhere in your heart except what we call the Widowmaker artery.
Right.
And a heart attack is imminent. It is completely blocked. So I was like, oh my gosh. Well, I'm so glad you told me this. And why doesn't everybody get one of these so they know this before the heart attack happens? And she said, well, it's just not part of standard medical practice. And I said, well, a colonoscopy is. So why isn't everybody getting this? Why aren't we preventing all these stupid heart attacks? And she said, well, it's a long story, but we just don't do that. And insurance doesn't even pay for that test. So anyway, as I was walking into Mission Hospital to have my heart surgery, I saw in the lobby this big banner that said, we have an alternative approach here at Mission Hospital. And I thought, well, this is kind of curious. It said, we have what's known as the Dean Ornish approach to cardio rehab. And I thought, wow, I want to find out more about that. So I had my little heart procedure, everything went fine. But when they asked me about the cardio rehab, I said, I don't want regular cardio rehab. I want the Ornish approach, which we just happened to have at that time at Mission. So what I learned through that experience was that there was a lot I didn't know about how to live my life as a senior person in the world. And I learned things that we all should have learned in school. I mean, in school, we learn some social transition information we get a lot about how to go from high school to, say, college, or how to go from high school or college into a job. We get vocational education or training. And we get some education through media or whatever about how to have a good marriage and how to transition into marriage and all of this kind of stuff. But all we hear about becoming a retired person is you got to save money, and here are these investment alternatives, and we can help you understand Medicare and Social Security and all this stuff. But we're not really getting any information about what we need to transition well into retirement years and have a stronger, growing, nurturing sense of well-being. And I was lucky to go into the Dean Ornish program because he now has clinical studies, years and years of clinical studies that shows if you do what he's talking about, which really is about well-being, you will reverse your cardiovascular damage to your body. You can reverse, to a certain extent, some cancers. But it is not just about diet and exercise. It's about a lot more than that. And so I my own journey has been a learning process about this. And so I want to help others, help guide others through that kind of process.
Well, the point you're raising, I think, is spot on, Mark, because I went through a somewhat similar process, not health-wise, but just in terms of retirement, or as I told you, I call it rewirement. And I was lucky in the sense that I had been thinking about it 5 years beforehand, yet most of my buddies, almost the people I know, gave no thought to it, and just all of a sudden they worked to a certain age, and some of them died working, because they worked too long. And some other people were sad, Mark, retired, but they had no idea what they were going to do when they retired, so all of a sudden you worked every day 9 to 5, all your friends, relatives, and all of a sudden, back to what some of the work you do, you're to a point where, so now you retired, kind of now what, and I guess that's one of the things you work with people on, kind of answering that
Yes.
now what question.
It definitely is. And I think, excuse me, the thing is, we all go through this alone. We all sort of feel like this is only happening to me and nobody else is going through this, because there's nothing in the media about this. And yet 10,000 Americans are retiring every day, 7 days a week from now until 2030. So there's a ton of people going through this, but nobody's talking about it, especially men. I know of 3 prominent executives in the Asheville area who've had the same type of really sad story, where they were leaders in our community for years, very highly regarded. They retired, they had a big send-off, and then they thought they were just going to travel around with their spouse for 2 or 3 years, and then they would do something. But 2 or 3 years into their retirement, they actually collapsed. I mean, they had terrible depression. I mean, all of this sort of came out of nowhere. Had never experienced any of this in life, but it was even debilitating for one of them. And so they've come out of that, but coming out of it meant, for the first time, they had to think about inner purpose. What do I really want? And how do I want to serve in my senior years? How do I want to serve my community? And I think Dan Buettner was a journalist working for National Geographic.
Oh, sure.
Sort of happened on a gerontology study that in 2004 that found, all of these men in a certain part of Sardinia are living to be over 100. And how could that be? So as he started studying that, he found there were actually 7, he called them blue zones in the world, where people were just living a healthy life way past 100. And why was this happening? And he found the factors that contributed to that. And so the point is that we don't want to go live in these places. We want to create a blue zone of our own life. And that's what Dan Buettner is now working on, is how do I develop a community of blue zoners where together wherever we live, we are creating our best life together. And I think that is so important for us to be aware of, and to know that there are resources out there that can help us pull together and create our best experience in life.
Were you in Asheville when he came to speak to Asheville?
I don't think so.
Okay, yeah, he spoke. It was absolutely fantastic, and I read his book. And what was sad, Mark, based on what you were talking about, is there had actually been a movement many years ago to create a blue zone in Asheville. They were going to do it throughout the country. I don't know if it ever got off the ground, but wouldn't that Asheville have been a perfect place to create this blue zone? And it's a shame it never got off the ground, but it sort of seems to me some of the stuff you're doing with people is, I guess, might be to almost create their own blue zone, or create it. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes, right. I have, I have content. I mean, I have a model. I call it the high performance model of purpose-driven life, and a certain set of steps that people need to go through based on the research that I've done. I try to help anyone develop a just surprisingly enriched senior life that they really didn't know they could have. And I think that's open to each of us. to
Well,
have.
let me put you on the spot a little bit, man. It's a neat concept. Talk about conceptually how you work with somebody, such as myself or anybody else,
Yeah.
that they've worked all their life, they decide to retire, you discuss financial issues, but there's a lot more to retirement than just the financial issues, is what I hear you
Yeah.
saying. So how do you
Right.
work with somebody?
Well, the first thing that I don't do is just look them straight in the eye and say, okay, you're retired now. What is your purpose? What is your life purpose? Because at first I thought, well, I will have a process of discovery that will help people kind of discover what their life purpose is. That somehow it's kind of in here, it's just sort of locked up, and we just have the key and we unlock and find what that is. But then a colleague of mine said, well, Mark, I think really it's a little more than that. It's that people don't know how to create a purpose, a sense of life purpose. It's not that they can't find that it's in there and they can't find it and they can uncover it. They don't know how to relate to a sense of purpose at all. And so that means that we take a bit of a journey in exploration together to find it. But I think the first step really is to build self-awareness. And of course, you can do that through a variety of assessments like the Enneagram and the Myers-Briggs and the DISC and different things like that. So I have those assessments as a resource to help people understand, oh, this is how I perceive the world. This is how I like to relate to the world. These are the things that are important to me in terms of values. The Strengths Finder helps us find our strengths and values. But then moving from that, we have to talk a little bit about vision and kind of help the person imagine their best life. And one way to do that is I asked the person, when you were a child, who was an adult that really made an impactful difference in your life? This was an older person. Was that a grandparent, an aunt? Was it a teacher, a coach? Who was this person? And tell me about that person. And then I will say, okay, that person is getting ready to retire, and you want to encourage that person to have the best set of years they can have before they die. What do you want for that person? What do you imagine for that person? And then we turn that around and say, okay, that person is now you, and you have just described some things that I would want for you. And I want you to give yourself permission to want those things for yourself and for your spouse.
Mark, what's fascinating about what I hear you saying, even as you're mentioning it, I'm thinking about my life, is that these are things typically nobody's ever talked to me about, we talked with our earlier guests, you go to school and you learn certain stuff, and you and I, when we went to school, and I never understood, you took U.S. history, the same U.S. history 5 times, I never, Civil War was interesting, but, how many times did you study Civil War? But this stuff, wow, nobody, you mentioned strengths finders and stuff like that. Nobody ever kind of sat me down and said, hey, Blaine, let's look at this. So that's kind of cool that I guess that's the case for a lot of people, that nobody had ever looked at this.
Yeah. Yeah, they may have had some of those assessments in different companies as part of their career life, but not in the context of, okay, now I'm starting a new adventure. Who am I today? That's kind of a new process. Another piece of this, which comes a little later, is in terms of community and relational life, and the fact that all the clinical studies show that people who are healthy as they're older, they've got at least 8 people, if not more, that they are having intimate relational conversations with all the time. And many of us, as we get older, and this is true for me too, we're really pretty isolated. I mean, we don't have any 8 people in our lives that we could just call on at the drop of a hat and talk with. So I have a diagram, and I actually ask the person, okay, who are the 8 people in your life who are closest to you, and why are they the closest to you? And what kinds of things can you say to this person or this person? What kind of questions can you ask? If you need help, unexpected help, who are you going to ask? And we really talk about that. And then we talk about, well, how can you cultivate some more people, that are kind of outside the inner circle? Who are some backups? Because, I mean, we all experience this as we age. People are dying around us. Some of our friends die unexpectedly, and then others, they're just getting old. But we have to keep replenishing this circle of connection that we need around us. We have to keep replenishing it. None of us are accustomed to doing this. It seems really weird. As in one of the blue zones, this was over in, I think, Taiwan. When the children are born, the parents identify 7 other families and say, your baby and my baby will commit to each other for life. And these are groups of about 8 children who grow up together, and they support each other for their entire lives in an intact community.
This was tough, I imagine, Mark, for some of the work you do and the people you work with when COVID hit, because you're talking about, hey, it's great, and I agree with you completely, get out there, keep friendships, alive. But all of a sudden, now for a year plus, people couldn't get out anymore. I guess, let me get your opinion on this. I guess it could be done via Zoom, but it's not still the same. Do you agree, or?
Yeah, it's not the same. It is more difficult, but there are websites such as authrev.org, which stands for authenticrevolution.org. And they have worldwide Zoom groups at every hour of every day.
Oh, really cool.
Where your focus is on relational meditation, which is, I'm just going to be in the present, and I'm going to show interest in you, be genuinely curious. I'm going to ask you a few questions. I'm going to have an opportunity to notice my feelings and acknowledge those. I can acknowledge your feelings. It is an incredibly powerful process, and that's available to any of us. I mean, so yes, Zoom is more difficult. It is more challenging, but there are a lot of resources available.
Mark, in terms of talking about the resources, we'll talk about working with you specifically. How does somebody choose to work with Mark Medlin, or if they like some of the things you're saying in terms of what I hear you're saying is, hey, we'll talk about the financial stuff, and that's important too, but it seems there's a lot more to prepare for retirement than just care about the financial stuff. How does somebody reach you?
Yeah, I have a website. It's just Mark, M-A-R-K, middle initial C, the last name Medlin, MEDLIN.com. MarkCMedlin.com is my website. That's also my email address, markcmedlin@gmail.com.
Okay, and if they go there, what will they find?
Well, the website, it talks about let's create the best chapter of your life. You're retiring, and so I have a video, I have a blog, I have some information on the website. They also can click one button and my appointment calendar comes up. They can easily make an appointment. I like to have initial conversations with people for free. I mean, I'm glad to talk with people. And I think the more, here we are, all these baby boomers, this huge population of people. We're getting ready to enter an unprecedented stage in life. All these people who are healthy and going to have all this leisure time, 20, 30 years of leisure time until they die. We're taking with us an enormous amount of expertise in every field in the country out the door with us. And we're not very focused on passing a legacy of education and information on to the next generations. We need to be very focused on mentoring in this country because we have so much to share and we don't really know how to get into that position or do that. That's another one of the things I work on with people is legacy is not your will and your money. Legacy is a lot more than that. What do you want to do with your life for the next 10, 20, 30 years? that leaves a legacy for the next generations.
By the way, you're giving a great bit of advice there too, in terms of people looking what they're going to do after they retire, to give back to the community or help other people. You know, it can be done, and you have to. I guess what I'm hearing you say is, it just doesn't happen. You kind of have to plan for it or think about it. And most people, back to what we said earlier, I guess, just don't give too much thought to the process before they retire.
Yeah.
You know,
I would like people to consider the opportunity to be more intentional. And I think if we reach out to each other and talk with each other, and we can develop some dreams, some plans that are beyond what we might have imagined.
in terms of working with each other, you gave, I think, some good advice too. I wasn't familiar with the one thing you mentioned, that there's this website out there, this group out there that has people throughout the world, I guess, offering
Yes.
to meet with you and be with you.
Right. Yeah, that's called Authentic Revolution. It's authrev.org. And it's a relational meditation process. So each session lasts about an hour. There will be 20 or 30 people who will be on a Zoom call, and they will be divided out into small groups of 3 to 5 people. And it's a very simple process. You catch on immediately. It's not about asking people about their history or their stories or introductions about the career. It's none of that. It's more about just being present with each other and talking about what's going on in the here and now with each other. So
I'm sorry. Talk also then back to working with Mark Medlin. So if people want more information, best bet is go to the website initially, then have a consultation with you at some point in time. I assume that can be done in person, but it can also be done via Zoom?
yes, both.
Okay.
Right.
And after they have these consultations, what's the process then at that point in time? What happens? How do you work with people?
Well, I'm an ideas guy, so I give people lots of ideas in our initial conversation, and they can go off and do those ideas. If they want to work with me, then we would make some agreements about how that would look and how long that process would go, and that would be different for each person. I've worked with, it's just different for everybody. I've worked with some people who really want to narrow in down on, this is going to be my purpose and I'm passionate about it. Give me ideas about how to make it real. And then I'm going to create an annual plan and I'm going to come back to you and, that kind of thing. But then other people are, Mark, I just want to kind of explore and poke around and come back and just sort of share with you how that's going for me and where else I might go. And so it's different for different people.
How important is to put the plan in writing? Write it down.
It depends. I think it's great. It's a great process for some people, but for others, it's a little intimidating. So again, I try to tailor the approach, personalize it to the interests of each person.
And I guess one final bit of recommendation I'll ask you, Mark, in terms of when people should start this process. When should they start?
Yeah, great question. Great question, Blaine. You mentioned that you started your process, I think you said 3 or 5 years
Right.
before you were actually retired. And that's very important to do. And I think 3 years out is maybe too close. I think it should be even 5 or 10 years out just to begin thinking about it. Because that last 3 years, there's kind of a freight train of things that happen kind of unexpectedly. All of a sudden, people at work realize you're going to leave. And so you get a lot of, people asking you a lot of questions, or you can. That 3 years can go very, very quickly. So, but I think that process of preparing for retirement, about what kind of life you want to lead after you leave your work, is very important to be thinking about.
And one more time, Mark, your website is what, please?
It's markcmedlin.com, MarkCmedlin, or markcmedlin@gmail.com is my email address.
Okay. I'd like to thank you for being my guest the second half hour on Blaine's World Show. Also to Dewana Little for being my guest the first half hour, Cappy Tessetti, my producer. I'd Look forward to having you join me next Wednesday here at 9 a.m. on WPVM 103.7 Asheville, North Carolina. You can also listen online at WPVMFM.org and watch us on WPVM's Facebook page. Hopefully I'll see you folks next week. I think we lost Mark, but we'll see everybody next week. Thanks.